Good evening. Good evening once again. It's my privilege to be with you again on day 6 out of 8. It was looking like it's a very long week. Most of the time when I'm conducting family life sessions, it's a maximum of 7 sessions beginning Sunday to Sabbath. So this time I started on Sabbath, it was looking very long. And I just realized that there's so much that the Lord has for us to learn. So we are only just touching a tip of the iceberg. I pray that you go and study more. Today's topic, I just want to give a trigger warning alert. I know the word trigger is used everywhere, but now I'm using it very seriously. I will do my very best to make it as family friendly as possible. However, let me just say there's a trigger warning, and I'm going to talk about the impact of sexual abuse in the family. This is a topic that we have been given from the General Conference to teach and talk about as part of the Family Life Resource Packet, in case somebody thinks I have invented my own topic. And it's critically important for us as a people from diverse families to talk about this topic. The Bible also is not silent about sexual abuse when it comes to children especially. Before I draw your attention to two scriptures, 2 chapters in the Bible that talk about childhood sexual abuse, let me share with you 2 stories from 2 diverse families. I have been allowed to share these stories because they have been shared publicly. So for that purpose, I'm sharing for our learning. There was a young man who was raised in a family that was fairly well-to-do. Let's say it was a family in the village. They had land, they had animals, cattle. Both parents were teachers. And the mother was his teacher from earlier on from ECD. In this home, this young man was the last born in the family. I think the one he follows was maybe 5-10 years older than him. So he was Mokogoti, just like my Mokogoti. So the rest were in boarding school, in high school. Him, when he was young, he was in primary. And this family had a worker, a gardener, shamba boy, you can say, a male worker. It made sense for them to have a male worker because they had a compound, they had a shamba, land, they had cattle. And anyway, their child was a son. So it made sense for them to have a male worker. So he would go to school with the mother. Then when they come home, other times if the parents have gone somewhere, rarely he's with the male worker. This male worker was excellent, and he had served the family for many years. So they had no reason to doubt him, to even think about anything. Just like in many families, this young man had not been given sexuality education, so he didn't even know anything about his body or whatever. So one time, the shamba boy, I said, was very good to him. He used to take him to the shop, buy sweets, and they used to do a lot of things together. He was the beloved uncle. So one time, he called him to his house, and he locked him, and he sodomized him. This young man didn't have a language for what has happened. He just knew that it was painful, and it was uncomfortable. But he didn't know what had happened, and he was told never to disclose to anybody because it was their little secret. So he never told anybody. He continued in life. He performed very well. He went to a national school. He did excellent, just like his siblings. So much later, by the time he reached out for help, he blocked that experience at the back of his mind. So he never talked about it with anybody. So when he came to seek for help, he was seeking for help on the basis of, he told me he had a problem with sex addiction. So I said, how does it look like? He said he watches a lot of pornography and he masturbates compulsively to the point that he has injured his private parts. And he said that he has had a lot of sexual encounters with very many ladies. I can say that he would sleep with anything that breathes, anything. He was a very handsome, high-achieving young man in a great profession, great family, all of them highly educated across the world, parents stable, everything. So that was the issue. I said, can we talk about it? Because nobody gets into sex addiction just like that for no reason. So anyway, long story short, he came to reveal, he said, there's something I've never told anybody. Because I was asking, have you ever been sexually abused? He said, no. I said, think about it. And eventually he came to disclose that experience. He said he had never told it to anybody. He had never even sat down to think about it. That was an impact of sexual abuse to him. And that started a journey of healing, a very painful journey of an experience that happened to him as a young boy, maybe 4, maybe 6 years old. That is a story from a diverse family. Another story is told of a lady. She was raised in a family where the mother died. The mother died when they were young. She was 8, and I think they were 5. So if she was 8, the other one was maybe 6, 4, 2, a few months. So the mother died and left the 4 of them with their father. The father was employed. He was working. He took time to raise the children. He didn't remarry. I think he hasn't remarried even now. So he was raising these children. For some reason, after the mother died, there was a lot of conflict between his father and the mother's side. You know what happens when somebody dies? There's a lot of blame. Like people can feel, oh, you didn't take good care of her, whatever happened. So they were raised not having a connection to the mother's side. So they were connected only to their father's side. Fast forward, she completes high school. And the father said, because you have completed high school, I want you to go to Nairobi to my brother so that you can stay there and apply to go to college. So she came to Nairobi to stay with the uncle. The uncle had a wife. The wife was up country. So she stayed with the uncle. The uncle was living with other men in the house. So she would fetch water for them, wash their clothes as she was applying to go to college. So one Sunday, she remembers after doing the house chores, they ate lunch and the uncle bought a soda and she took the soda. That was the last thing she remembers, taking Fanta soda. She woke up the following morning in the uncle's bed, having been defiled, raped. So she didn't know anybody in Nairobi. There were no mobile phones. She didn't have the language to tell the father what has happened because there was not that relationship to tell the father. She didn't have any auntie who she could talk to. So a lot of the things about her body and everything, she had just learned along the way, maybe from school. So she thought, I need to get away from this house, but where do I go? How do I tell my father that the brother he trusted, how do I even put it? You know, some of these things in our mother tongue, they have no language. How do you even express? So the first thing she thought about is to run away to the uncle's friend, because that's the person she knew. She ran away to the uncle's friend and said, this is what has happened. He said, don't worry, I'll take care of you. The uncle's friend was much older. She was 18. The uncle's friend was 30-something or something like that. He took her in. He made her his wife. So he lived with her. She got a child. He took her to college. Abuse, sexual, emotional, physical. Anyway, long story short, eventually she left. I thank God because she has shared her story publicly and doing well for herself. 2 children later, having been abused physically, sexually, emotionally by this man, and a lot of terrible details. Such is what happens. And these are people in the church. And I wish I could be saying these are unique stories. These are stories that I hear every single day. And I just feel like we need to speak about it because places that we thought are safe, they are not safe. Let me share with you some statistics. According to the CDC, childhood sexual abuse is a significant public health problem. Research shows that 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males in the US will experience sexual assault before the age of 18. I must say that in Africa, in Kenya, for me, these statistics are very conservative. I can actually say 1 in every 2 females has experienced sexual abuse from the interactions I've had. 91% of the perpetrators are people that are known to the child. Those are friends and family members. I think from the 2 stories I've given you can see these are not strangers who abused these children. Abuse does not only affect the child and the family, but it also affects society with a lifetime economic burden. Because when people have been abused, it's very difficult for them to be productive members of society. And there's a wound that takes a lifetime to heal. There are families that are struggling when it comes to intimate relationships. A lot of families I know between husband and wife because the wife particularly, even the men, but mostly the wife was sexually abused. And for a female to be vulnerable and initiate, enjoy, and participate in sexual intimacy, the lady needs to feel safe. Safety is key. And it's very hard for somebody to feel safe when their innocence has been robbed, when they have been deflowered, especially as a child, particularly when the perpetrator is not held accountable. Because the people who are meant to protect the child, for whatever reason, they failed to protect the child. When we go to the Bible, in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 13, we can see the story of Amnon and Tamar. We know this story. Both of them, it was a son and daughter of King David. In the very home of the king, the daughter was sexually abused by the brother. In the book of Genesis chapter 34, there is a story of Dinah. Dinah was raped by the Shechemites, and it led to the massacre by the sons of Jacob. Okay, you can read those stories. I may not go deep because of time, but I just want to raise awareness so that we can realize that as a church and as a people, we need to take action in protecting the little ones, the children that are committed to us. Jesus tells us to be more like little children in humility, innocence, and dependence. That is from Matthew chapter 18, verse 3. Children are completely dependent on adults to care for their basic needs and even to provide nurturing and guidance. Their brains take several years to develop, to not only care for their own needs, but to have the executive functioning ability to know how their present behavior impacts their future. The human brain, we talked about this, is not fully mature until the mid-20s. So before then, the children, the people, the teenagers and the children are young. A stable, nurturing environment is essential for children to become healthy, contributing members of society. There are very many ways in which children can be hurt, but the most devastating one is sexual molestation, including when children are exposed to sexual content that they need not to be aware of. Sexual sin is a common way the devil wants to hurt God's creation and our relationships. And there are multiple verses that encourage sexual purity. And also there are multiple verses in the Bible against sexual immorality. Indeed, the book of Mark chapter 9:42 says, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would have been better for him if a great millstone were hung around the neck and it was thrown into the sea." That is what the Lord says. And sexual abuse is actually the most harmful adverse childhood experience due to its long-term impact on a child's development. So a lot of things can happen to the child, but by far the most devastating is sexual abuse. What really is the impact of sexual abuse? How does it look like? I'm going to give you about 4 ways in which sexual abuse affects a child. The first way is in the behavior. Children who have been sexually abused are more likely to use drugs and substances. It is not typical for a child to use drugs and substance. So when a child is using drugs and substance, we need to investigate what is the pain they are trying to numb or what is the pleasure they are looking for. So children are likely to use drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of sexual abuse. I'm not saying that all children who use drugs have been abused, but I'm saying it's important to investigate. Emotionally, there are higher rates of depression, suicide, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they are also more likely to be victims of abuse. Rarely do you find somebody being abused as an adult for the first time. Usually, it has happened before, okay? So the cycle is perpetuated because when somebody has been abused sexually as a child, for them to get through that, their bodies have to freeze. They have to freeze and numb and not feel. So you find as they grow older, they learn to freeze in the face of danger. So they can be walking in a dark alley and they hear footsteps from the back. Typically, somebody would run. But for them, when they hear footsteps, they freeze. So that way they become victims of sexual abuse. So they keep on being abused. Can I also say that when somebody gets abused, even if it's domestic violence, physical abuse, rarely is it happening for the first time. Most of the time, maybe they have experienced it, it has been normalized because abuse is like an electric shock. The first time it shocks somebody, after that, they develop tolerance. So when a child has been abused when they are young, chances of them being re-abused as they grow older are high. Physically, higher rates of STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, physical injuries, chronic conditions later in life, including heart disease, obesity, hypertension, diabetes. They are at risk. Spiritually, Since the vast majority of sexual assaults are committed by trusted adults, this can impact the child's view of a caring, loving Heavenly Father. In addition, the child may wonder how a loving God could have allowed the abuse to happen, or why didn't God save me? So it's very difficult when a child has been abused, especially sexually, for them to relate to a loving God. It's even worse when the abuse happens in the church. And if they come to the church, they will be attracted to cultic, authoritarian beliefs, because that is the way they experienced God as being harsh. I think over time, other than the Shakahola massacre or whatever, the Shakahola deaths and what, we have had many experiences where people have been abused sexually by religious leaders. Let me share with you one of them that has been reported. It's of a cultic leader called T.B. Joshua. Maybe you have heard of him. He died on 5th of June 2021. When pastors pray, when church leaders pray, they actually isolate and abuse their flock. And especially women, they become vulnerable. And most of the time, women who have been sexually abused. T.B. Joshua founded a synagogue, Church of All Nations, and also Emmanuel TV in 1987 in northwestern Nigeria. He had a huge presence on social media. A lot of us might have come across YouTube. The channel had over 1 million subscribers. And he was even listed in the Forbes magazine as Nigeria's third wealthiest evangelist. Behind the facade of this charismatic evangelist was a hypocrite who operated a cult anchored on manipulation, coercion, control, and sexual violence. He violently sexually abused young and married women, some adolescents also, in the synagogue. When they got pregnant, they were subjected to non-consensual abortions in one of the rooms in the synagogue. Okay? He got away with a lot of things. And there was infringement of the regulations, even the way the synagogue was constructed. And yet he went away, he got away with it. Due to the high number of foreign visitors at the synagogue, Joshua rapidly constructed a building, a multiple-story building, and he called it the guest house that flouted Nigeria's building regulations. On September 12, 2014, the building collapsed, killing 116 people, 84 of them young women from South Africa who had traveled to receive healing miracles. I don't know whether to say, fortunately, he died under mysterious circumstances in the year 2021. In some of these African countries, rape is very high. The incidence of rape defilement is very high. So you find some of these ladies, young girls who have been abused, they become vulnerable to some of these cultic leaders. And you wonder, by the time it gets here, is there something that probably could have been done? Is there something that might have been missed? Sadly, the wife was aware, but she was part of the conspiracy, I must say, because nothing really was done to him at the time, also because of the corruption in this country. So I hope that we realize that sexual abuse is not just a crime. It is an atrocity against humanity and even against the spirit, the very spirit of us as a church, and it has long-lasting impact on the spiritual health of the victims of abuse. Let me talk about another impact. There were 4. I said behavioral, emotional, I said physical, I said spiritual. I want to talk about reproductive health effects. This is something that has gained prominence over the past few years, I must say, how reproductive health issues are related to childhood sexual abuse. Can I tell you something that may be surprising? When I listened to Dr. Gabo Mate, who is one of the leading experts in childhood trauma, he talked about reproductive health issues, fibroids, endometriosis, related to early childhood sexual abuse, I was very shocked. Because the people I knew within my circles who have experienced, these women who have experienced reproductive health issues, there were very many. And I kept on listening to him. You can listen to him on YouTube, Dr. Gabo Mate, elderly Canadian Jewish doctor, fantastic gentleman. So I kept on listening. I said, is that so? So I went on my own research, so to speak, anecdotal. All the ladies who came to me and they were struggling with either, endometriosis, fibroids, and what have you, I have taken time to talk to them regarding early childhood sexual abuse. I have not met one who was not sexually abused. And there are thousands across the world. I have not met one. Even the ones who tell me they were not, when we go further and further, they actually say, there's something I've never told anybody. Then they say, when I was a child, this happened and I blocked it. But now as we have continued talking, something has come to my mind. And they even tell me they go further to ask family members because memories can come of somebody who lived with them. There was a river, there was something, but they are doubting. They're like, am I really clear? Did it happen? So I tell them you can go and ask a family member who lived with you at the time whether there was a river, whether there was a person like that. And they come 100%, they tell me, yes, my mother said we actually had somebody like this. Some stories are so disturbing, I wouldn't even share them from the pulpit. But the point I'm saying is, many things now are becoming clear that ladies and even men, but especially ladies, women, struggling with reproductive health conditions that are largely avoidable, you can say, because related to childhood sexual abuse. What are the signs? What could be the signs that a child has been sexually abused? If a child is having an STI, a sexually transmitted infection, you might just want to find out. If there is trauma in the genital area of the child, you may need to find out. If the child is talking excessively about sexual topics, they are obsessive about sexual topics every time they're talking about it, you need to investigate. If a child is keeping secrets and they are not talking as usual, you just notice they are not as open, they are not as chatty, they are keeping secrets, you need to find out because many sex predators tell children, this is our little secret. If a child is regressing in their behavior, I was told of a family where the two girls had started wetting the bed. One of them is about 12, I think 11, the other one 5. So somebody, a family member told me, there are children in our family who have started wetting the bed. 12 years, 5. I said, I hope I'm wrong, but you need to investigate for sexual abuse. They investigated, they actually found that the older girl was sexually abusing the younger. And when they found out, they found the older girl had been sexually abused. So she was abusing her sister every night. I'm glad that the children are getting help. But it's important if a child regresses, maybe they were potty trained, they are regressing, they are going back. They were talking, they begin stammering. Maybe they were walking, they are now no longer walking, something like that. It's important to investigate. If a child is overly compliant, children naturally challenge authority when you tell them to do something. But if a child is overly compliant, you say something, they do. Tell them, sit there, keep quiet, I'm coming. They are very compliant. You need to investigate. If a child has sexual behavior that is inappropriate for their age, they are touching other children, they are kissing, they are doing things that you say, there's something here. This child is acting behaviors that are inappropriate. You may want to find out. If a child spends an unusual amount of time alone, we are wired for connection. So if you see a child is isolating, you want to investigate. If a child is trying to avoid removing clothes or to change, they don't want to change, they don't want to bathe, you may want to find out. If there's a change in eating habits, they are either eating too much or eating too little, or if a child is having nightmares, you want to investigate. If a child is self-harming, if a child has failing grades, or they begin taking alcohol or drugs. Sadly, for most parents, when a child is having failing grades, they get a tutor. I wish I can tell you how many of these children don't need tutors. What they just need is to listen to them and get to the root cause. And the parents will even say, we are paying tutors, we are paying fees in a very expensive school. They are not doing well. What do you mean they are not doing well? They are just failing in grades. They are failing. Nobody just wakes up one morning and just fails in grades. Maybe you need to investigate, is a child being sexually abused? Let me talk about the risk factors. Who are the children who are at risk? because there are children who are in our diverse families, there are children who are more at risk of sexual abuse. These are children whose parents are not working, meaning that the parents are of low economic status. So the children easily get lured by goodies from other people, from strangers, or even not just strangers, but from relatives and other people, because they receive help because their parents are not able to provide. If children who are living in the rural areas, because of the taboos, the traditions, the parents don't talk about it, and because people live in a community, the society has really changed. The community that meant to protect children no longer protects children. If children have witnessed victims of crime, when children have witnessed abuse, they become more at risk because it's normalized. The abuse gets normalized. If a child is passive, quiet, troubled, lonely, or the child is from a single-parent home, and here I'm not in any way stigmatizing single-parent homes. What I'm saying is that it's a very heavy responsibility for a parent to parent single. So they are likely to seek help from people, and some of the people are likely to take advantage. So such children are vulnerable. If the children trust easily, you find anytime somebody is picking the child, they follow. It's not a good thing when a child trusts easily. So children who trust easily, they're likely to be vulnerable. In a certain church, there was somebody who was a Pathfinder teacher. This is not anything against Pathfinder teachers. He came in and he was very good with children. And you know what we do? If there's any leader from the children ministry, please listening to me. We see somebody and we are like, they're very good with children. We quickly recruit them in the children ministry. This man, because he appeared very good, the children, especially the boys from single-parent homes, the parents found it very convenient to allow him to mentor their children. So he will go with them for sports, he will take them for swimming, takes them for places. He was very available. Unfortunately, he was abusing boys. So one time, and they would not say, so one time he was I know this is very disgusting, he was in the vestry preparing, and they were preparing for some presentation, and they attempted to abuse one of the boys in the preparation room. The boy ran out and he screamed. He said this is what he was trying to do. This was more of an empowered child. So when it was investigated, a lot of boys in Pathfinder came up, a church here in Nairobi, they came up and said he had done this to them, but they could not say. And as parents, we feel safe when a man is with male children. We would be, we would be on the watch out if it's a girl. But you're like, boys, yeah, go with them. So a lot of boys in that church had been abused. And you know how we respond? Instead of getting this person and having him arrested immediately, we want to call ourselves to go and pray first. So as the leaders were praying and calling church board to discuss what action to take, the man ran away. When they checked, he didn't even have membership in that church. When they followed him, he didn't have membership in any Adventist church. He used to go to churches, join children ministry, abuse children. When he's getting known, he ran away. The sad thing, this man might be on the prowl because we don't even know whether the name he was using was his name. So can I give you guidance? If you hear a case of a child having been abused, as the church board decides to meet and as you call the pastor, immediately get this person, have them arrested. We will visit them in prison. I have told church members many times, a lot of our churches, Kiswahili-speaking churches, have a very vibrant chaplaincy ministry, complete with the uniform. And Christ said, I was in prison, you visited me. Who is this you think we are visiting in prison? See, these are the people we visit in prison. Do you understand what I'm saying? You arrest this person, then we will visit them in committee maximum prison as the church board meets to decide how redemptively we can minister to this person. But they have to be in prison because they are not safe, they are a danger to themselves and a danger to society. And probably maybe in prison they will meet with the Lord, we don't know. But they have to be in prison because there's a difference between sexual immorality and sexual criminality. Sexual immorality is whereby you have two consenting adults. You cannot take them anywhere, you cannot report them to the law, but maybe as a church, they can be, how do we call it? Do we still say disfellowship? There may be a kind way of putting it, but they can be disfellowshipped, but they cannot be reported to the authorities. Sexual criminality is abuse of power or any sexual involvement with a minor. That one, as much as the church follows due process, the person has to be reported to the authority. If we do not, we are participating, we are perpetuating, and we are part of it. It's just that simple, okay? Let me talk about incest. I'll just talk about incest and maybe take questions and comment. I know this is really a heavy topic, but I think it's good we talk about it. Let me talk about risk factors for incest, because we have said a lot of children are abused by members of the family. What are some of those factors that predispose children to incest? If there is verbal or physical abuse in the family. That is why our church has joined the global community in saying no to domestic violence. Because when there is domestic abuse, children are left exposed to abuse, sexual abuse, because the parents are not in a space to take care of these children. If families, there are families that accept father-daughter nudity. There are families that don't have boundaries between fathers and daughters, or even mothers and sons. Families where the mother is not close to the daughter, because a lot of children who are abused, boys as well, but girls more so. So if the mother is not close to the daughter, like one of the stories I shared with you, this girl didn't have a mother, and she didn't have a mother figure, so she didn't have anybody to report or to share with. Families with an adult male other than the biological father in the home. So if there's a family that has an adult male other than the biological father, this family, the children are more at risk. And I'm not saying that all male relatives would abuse, but a lot of them do. If the family is, how do I want to put this way? If there are no boundaries in the family. There are families whereby children are conditioned to call everybody uncle, auntie. The children everywhere, I tell parents, please be very careful who you tell your children to call uncle, auntie. Because when the children call uncle, auntie, it evokes feelings of love. So when something happens to them, this auntie or this uncle, it's very hard for them to report. So the family has no boundaries, so that you have people coming in and out. These children are at risk. It's important as a parent to let your child know that you will always be available to listen to them, and you will respond to any issues that they may have. As a parent or an older person, it's important for you to err on the side of caution. It's better you suspect, you go to find out, you find that the child was not abused, other than you trying to ignore and say maybe the child is imagining things and you find that it has happened, because the impact is deep, great, and it's very difficult for individuals to recover from sexual abuse. And if you are dealing with a victim of sexual abuse, it may be important for you not to tell them about Christ. Don't tell them about the Bible. Don't read scripture. Be Christ, be the Bible to them. Because at that time, Christ or the Bible does not make sense. But they need to learn that they can trust you. That is when probably you may begin to make a headway into them, and they can trust you and they can eventually come back to God. But as much as possible, read your Bible, be the Bible, be Christ. Do not even ask them to pray. Don't even say, let's pray. Just be there. You can pray for them privately. I would be glad to take any questions, but allow me to share one more story to emphasize that part of boundaries. There's a certain missionary family that were ministering in another country. They were a very generous missionary family, and they would have a lot of young men, especially who was in choirs. They were in a university in that country, so they would have a lot of young people coming to their home. The young people would sing because the family really loved music. I think there's something about Adventist families, except my family. Most families can really sing. So I don't know what happens. I must have missed the memo. So this family used to really sing. So they used to have, when choirs come, the choirs would actually stay in that family. One of the children in this family, a middle child, she used to be the problematic child. In my family, I'm that one. I'm that problematic child who would ask a question about everything. Why? Why should I do this? I don't understand. So this child was the problematic one. So when something goes wrong, the parents used to say, this must be you. So particularly now, there was this choir that used to frequent their home during prayer time, and the prayers could be long. By the way, I think that's why I have an aversion towards long prayers. I think I just say, please pray for yourself. Then in the congregation, shorten your prayer. Anyway, so this family, they would come, they would pray. You know the way you hold hands, and you're praying round the circle. The act, you know that act prayer? Adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. They would pray. So there was this young man in the choir who always used to like this girl. The girl was isolated. You see, we said children who are isolated. She was isolated in the family. She was the problematic one who was being prayed for every time. Please, if you have to pray for a child as a parent, pray privately. Don't let them hear what you're praying for. So this young man would come, and he was always, holding this child, throwing her up, and during prayer, he would be holding the child. Imagine during prayers, he used to molest this child during prayers, when everybody's eyes are closed. Then the girl could fidget and try to scream, to make noise. After the prayer, she will receive a thorough beating. That you are problematic, why do you make noise during prayer? She couldn't say what has happened. The abuse happened repeatedly. This man would molest her every time there was prayer. And she would be whipped because she's not silent during prayer. Many years later, when she was over 35, struggling in her marriage in matters intimacy, it's when she revealed that she had been molested severally by this young man. Up to that point, the parents had no idea. And she was wondering whether to tell them that the whipping she was receiving, she was being molested, because she felt her parents are now elderly, retired, and they are ill. So she felt if she tells them, the guilt is going to be overwhelming for them, and it may shorten their life. So as parents, what I'm saying is that even that problematic child, just try to find out, what is it? Let me understand. Instead of whipping the child, especially when it comes to matters spiritual. You look very sad. I just want to pause here. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment? That is the world we live in. Any question, even online, or you want to write? Pastor, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Seems to be off today's topic. Even the one who addressed has written that. How should I don't know whether maybe you cover it tomorrow or another day, you can clarify. How should couples handle respective phones, since it's an emerging issue in families, especially young families?
Are you talking about phones?
Phones, yeah.
Phones, simu.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if there's any other question related to today or another day. I know that I have been receiving questions regarding couple marital relationships, and I'm aware that we have not covered it in this forum. There are many topics we are covering on diverse families. Any questions somebody has? Yes, Pastor, go ahead.
Shared. What is your say according to based on? Let me just be direct. A father changing a girl child. I know you get what I'm saying in terms of diapers and all those things. What is your counsel on that, regarding that? Is it safe? Is it tempting? That's what I'm asking.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for that question. And I know there's a cultural perspective to that. Let me try and see if I can be helpful. Normally, matters of sexual impropriety, is it called inappropriateness or whatever, it is not just a physical act. It begins with the mind. Let me give you an illustration of a true story that happened in one of the countries. The mother was cooking. You know, there are homes, places whereby, like if you even go to the West, you are raising children, you don't have domestic help. Yeah, and it's the father who is there. Will they not change their daughter? So the mother was cooking. The girl was 3 years. The mother was cooking. She left the father to change the girl. He noticed it was taking very long. This is not a good story. Let me share. He was taking very long to change her. He said, but it's cold. You have not changed the child. He found the father staring at the private parts of the girl. He said, what are you staring at? The father said, I'm just imagining there's a man who is going to enjoy this. The mother left the food cooking on the stove. This was an empowered mother. She picked her child in the night, disappeared into darkness. The marriage ended that night. She did not come back. She divorced. True story. The marriage ended. Because by the time it's occurring in your mind to see your daughter as a sex object, there's a fundamental problem. And that's a person who can abuse. I was talking with my brother sometime this year. I have my last-born brother. Of course, he's not so young. He's maybe 15 years younger than me. But we talk a lot, and I raised him. So we were talking. Then he was telling me how there are cases whereby brothers and sisters are having sexual relations, and fathers and daughters. So when we talked with my brother, I said, it has never occurred to me, even when we sit in the same space and we would speak the whole night with my brother, my elder brother, it never occurred to me that I can begin having sexual feelings towards my brother. It just cannot occur to me in that way. I don't see my brother or my son or my cousins as a sexual person. I've never even visualized. So by the time you find a father is seeing the daughter as a sexual object, it is not even about the changing of the diapers that is going to tempt him. It is that his mindset, there's a critical problem. He may not change the diaper, but later on as she grows, the more he will begin seeing her. And I'm sorry to say, there are so many girls, women, who are sexually abused by their fathers. A lot of them, their mothers were aware, but they did nothing. And when I'm taking them through the journey of healing, they forgive their father, but it's very hard for them to forgive the mother who never protected them. They say, I told my mother, she knew, and she told me to keep quiet because where is she going? And we have to be paid for school fees. So really, I just want to help you by saying there's a cultural context when it comes to boundaries, but also critically, if you can look at your child or your sister as a sexual object person, critically, perhaps that person needs help. Even when I remember a colleague telling me that he had a beautiful wife from the coastal region, and the wife, his cousins and other young girls used to come and stay in his house. But one thing I remember this man told me, is a respectable man, he said, all those beautiful girls who come from the coast to live with us, I have never in my wildest imagination looked at those girls as people somebody can have an affair with. Because for me, they are my little sisters. And besides, he said, I have a son who is a teenager. So to imagine that my son could be looking at them in that way, and I'm also looking at them in that way, that is sacrilegious. I cannot even go there. So fundamentally, there is a problem. Can I also add that many people who abuse, they were sexually abused. I'm not saying this to excuse anybody, but I'm just saying this, that perchance, if you find yourself sexualizing other people, when you look at other people, you see body parts, and you imagine how they are going to meet your sexual needs, you probably might have gone through an experience that needs healing, so that you look at people as a wholesome human being made in the image of God. Okay? So maybe that's the guidance that I would like to give. Okay, good. Are we good to go? You have one more?
I've sent more questions.
Okay. Let me. We have a few minutes.
Yeah. But there are also questions there. I saw hands. Someone is asking, how do you talk to 5-year-old about sex education? Then another one says, okay, this is just a comment. Someone says, thank you for the presentation, and we need to have more of sexual abuse talks in the church. Then there's another one who's asking, he's saying, I'm one of them who are molested, and it is affecting my relationship now. How do I go about it?
Yeah, thank you so much even for sharing that. Let me do this. I'll answer those ones, but if there was a hand, let me take, then I answer all of them and we finish. Was there a hand? Please go ahead.
How do you help a teenager whom you suspect has been sexually abused and is not willing to go for counseling, Because one time the counselor spoke to the mother, and when she was beginning to open up, the mother was too harsh to this girl.
Okay. Let me see if I can help you. I've learned that parents, even just like myself, are unprepared to deal with that. So you find they also have their own unresolved sexual abuse trauma. So the response is inappropriate. Sometimes I've had children even come to me and they disclose. And I guide the parent, I don't give the details, but I guide the parent that this is how to help your child. The parent goes and tells the child, how can you tell a stranger things that you're not telling me? And imagine this parent has paid, looked for me and paid, and I tell her, we are here to help the child. We are not here to see who is more the favorite of the child. That's not our business. So you find the parent not being prepared. First of all, I say parents, because they are the adults, they need to be prepared. They need a session. For me, if a parent brings a child, it's a mandatory session for the parent before, so that I can get to understand what are the issues. After the child, the parent needs a session or two, so that they are prepared, because these news are very hard even for parents. Can I tell you, a lot of parents whose children were abused, they were also sexually abused. And because of the silence, it predisposes their children to abuse. So if you go now telling a parent that their child has been abused without preparing them, they will be harsh. They will act out because there's a lot going on. There are memories, it's a trigger, blame. It's just a sticky mess. So the parent has to be prepared. And there are certain cases where sometimes the child can be helped without the parents coming in the picture earlier on, the better. Okay? So the parent, I can say, needs help. And this child, many children ordinarily, the moment they know that they are safe, they will open up because the burden is simply too heavy and it affects them in many ways. So children need to find a safe space where they can open up, they can share, and can I say that they need help from a qualified professional? Because many people are not a lot of people may not have the skills to deal with sexual abuse. So it needs professional help. The parents, the family actually needs help. That's what I can say. So let me respond to those ones. So there was the first one was on helping a child. I think it was it only one? How do you talk to a 5-year-old on sexuality education? Yeah. Or how do you go about it? So okay, good, I get it. So let me briefly talk about it because that's a whole session altogether. From an early age, you can find YouTube resources I've shared on how to introduce the topic, but I'll just summarize. From an early age, you need to begin introducing this child to the topic. You're building up on it. It's a progression. It's not a one-day thing. So when a child is about 3 to 4 years and they can communicate, teach them about their private parts. Name them by name, the name they are called. Don't use pseudonyms. Don't use pet names, because children have been abused. They don't have the language to speak. So use the names. When you don't use the names, you also teach the child that you are ashamed about it. So name them, give them their correct name. Name the private parts, tell them nobody should touch, nobody should see, nobody should lick. Teach them to shower themselves and to dress in private. Parents, do not change in the presence of your children. Do not sleep with a child beyond 2 years, because there are parents who have sexualized their children by exposing the children to their sexual activity. And they think the child is too young. If you have a single room, must you have a child? So please do not spend in the same space with your children. You expose them to sexual activity. You sexualize them very early. And the memories, the images don't go away, okay? So 3 to 4 years, you're teaching them their private parts. Nobody should touch, see, lick. You're teaching them to dress themselves in private. Do not bathe 2 children together. Bathe them separately, even if they're the same gender, because there's a lot of homosexuality. So you're teaching them privately. If you have boys and girls, separate their sleeping places. Don't put your boys and your girls to sleep together. And if you have just one room, divide the room. Put furniture or something so that each of the genders, they have privacy. By the time a child gets 6 to 7 years, they need to know what sex is. Because if they do not hear it from you, they will Google. Somebody else will tell them, and this person does not share your values. By the time a child is getting to teenage, you are now talking about homosexuality, LGBTQI. Because I know children who have been introduced to homosexuality, they don't know what it is. They were told boys if it's a girl. She was told boys are bad, avoid boys, you should not do this with boys. They go to a school, a girl begins to touch them, and they think it's okay. Things start happening, they don't have a language for this lesbianism. So a lot have confessed to me. They say, I didn't know. So they kept on doing it until eventually they are expelled that they are lesbians. And the parent is saying, what? Then the child says, yeah, it started happening to me when I was in class 4 in boarding school, or even if not boarding. And me, I didn't know. So they need to know now. You have talked about the normal, sex, heterosex, sexual. Then now you're telling them about homosexuality. Talk to your children about family values. When are they allowed to have sex? And of course, as Christians, I can say it's until marriage. Talk about abstinence. Will your children successfully abstain if you have talked to them? They may not. But the thing is that you have done your part. So, and let your children know that you are open and willing to always talk to them if they have questions. So when they have questions, they will always default and talk to you about it. And as they talk to you about it, be open to talk to them anytime that they need to listen. They need to hear. Research has shown that children who receive sexuality education from their parents, they tend to have delayed sexual debut. By the time they have sex, maybe they are married, if they heard it from parents. But those children who hear it from school, from friends, from church, they are likely to begin experimenting with sex early because they have not heard from the most trusted source. So as a parent, you're the primary sex educator for your child. You're the most trusted source. If you feel guilty, maybe not guilty, but if you feel ashamed, you feel uncomfortable, maybe you have your own hang-ups that you need to deal with. Maybe it's the way it was taught to you. Maybe there are some choices you have made that are the wrong choices. Some of us are carrying guilt because of some of the wrong choices. Ask God to forgive you. Forgive yourself. Deal with your own shame. Once you've dealt with your own shame, then it becomes easier for you to introduce it to your child. Finally, let me respond. I said you can find YouTube videos. If you go click, you will find some teachings I have done on that topic. So let me talk about it's affecting you. Indeed, there are many people that are being affected. Sexual abuse needs professional help, by and large, because it's very painful to go down that path of healing. So somebody needs accountability and support, and they need tools to deal with the impact of sexual abuse. So what I can encourage that person is, please reach out to somebody to walk you through the journey. There are a lot of marriages that I know who are being impacted heavily. They cannot enjoy the gift of sexual intimacy because the partner, one of the partners, most of the time the woman, but even some men, they were sexually abused. And I said, no healthy woman can enjoy sexual intimacy if they don't feel safe. They must feel safe physically, meaning they are not being physically abused. Emotionally, meaning they have not gone through a previous experience that reminds them. Financially, they must feel safe that whatever outcome of this sexual intercourse, the man, particularly, or the partner, is going to be fully capable of providing. So if your partner, there's safety in all those areas, but they are struggling, maybe it may be important for somebody to seek help. And I know a lot of people are blocked the experiences because the experiences are so traumatizing. The brain blocks them to keep you safe, to keep someone safe. So the brain is going to block, the mouth is going to shut, but the body always remembers. The body will always remember. So at the very touch, somebody just grows very cold because the body will always remember. Even when the mouth cannot speak and the brain shuts, okay? This just sounds like a very sad evening. I made sure I did the presentation today. I didn't want to do it tomorrow because leading to Sabbath. So we have time to process tomorrow to deal with it before Sabbath. Thank you so much. May God bless you.